you've done some investigation into refining the topic for your research question, your research project. And so before we move forward with that process, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit. I have had the question, are we actually going to perform an action research investigation, or are we just coming up with a plan? We're actually going to do the action research. So that's another reason I wanted to have a conversation, so that we can talk about the fact that your topic needs to be timely, because you're not going to have a lot of time to collect data. So let's start by talking about choosing the right research question. So the first thing is going to involve something that's within your authority, that you know about. So for people in this course, for some of us it will be teaching. For some of us it will be school nursing, could be health. Some might be recreation, physical education, educational technology, being a school librarian, and even school counseling or psychology. There's a wide range of expertise in this course. The book that we're using is geared towards education. However, that doesn't mean that your project has to be geared toward instruction or a classroom. I want this to be relevant to you and what you're doing. We all are involved in a school setting of some kind, whether it be from nursing, teaching, counseling. So we've got some experience in education, but it's different. And I'm going to work with you to help design a question that's going to be within the scope of your authority. And then you also want that question to be something that you're passionate, that you really want to know about. Something that as you are working every day, every once in a while you go, why? Why is that the way it is? You know, what makes you, that things that make you go, and that's all, some of you. But what makes you go, And there might be more than one thing. That's why on the brainstorming ideas, I have you provide more than one question, because there's usually more than one thing that we're curious about. So what piques your curiosity? What's something that you really would love to know? Why does that work the way it does? Or why doesn't that work the way I think it should? Or how can we do that better? How can we do that different? So something that is you have a personal investment in. And then the third, it needs to be something that some kind of performance, some kind of action could or should improve what you see. Okay, so what question, within your everyday practice, what's a question that you could easily answer or explore in a short amount of time? Okay, so you could implement some kind of action or observe some kind of action, or make an observation and then include maybe some action step, and then make another observation and see if there was an improvement, a change compared to items. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to talk a little bit about maybe some specific scenarios to maybe jog your ideas, to get you started thinking along the lines of action research. So the first one, here's one idea. And on the left, you'll see a little scenario, something to do. On the right, these are research questions that might emerge from this idea on the left. Okay, so for this first one, we're talking about assessment. And for those of us who are teachers, assessment is a big deal. Teachers always think we're always testing. We test all the time. Okay, so the scenario here says, do this. Observe a few classes and record when they actually conduct assessment. Then survey the teachers to see how much do they think assessment occurs. What are their perceptions of assessment? And then how does that perception compare to what actually happens? And do those perceptions change decision making for instruction, for whether we do more engaging, interactive things, exercises during class, or whether we go straight by the book because we've got to get this, and this done before we do the assessment. So how does that change things? So there's some of the questions that might arise from this observation. Now, these aren't the only three possible questions. There's more questions that could arise from this scenario. But you'll notice each of the questions is specific. None of the questions could be answered with just a simple yes or no. That's one thing we want to avoid is yes or no questions. Because we don't want to know just if it does. We want to know how or why or when or what happens. So we want to go a little deeper than just does it work, does it not work? Okay? So these are some possible questions specific to this topic of assessment. All right, here's another scenario. Okay, and it's kind of two different ones. So, go out, interview some students, do a student survey about what kids know about the school's anti-bullying policy. And as part of that, also ask them, how does that policy affect them? Or you could do it this way. You could, I'm sure, somewhere in the school, there is a log of bullying, complaints, reports, incidences of bullying, that get recorded. Okay, so take instances before an anti-bullying policy was implemented. Okay, then look at the statistics of bullying complaints or reports after that policy was implemented. Compare those. What differences do you see? Has anything changed? Has anything not changed? If not, why not? Ask some questions. Do some follow-up survey. Okay. So on the right over here are three possible questions that could emerge from these scenarios. What effect does anti-bullying policy have on students? Okay. What has the anti-bullying policy done to the occurrence of cyberbullying, even going even a little more specific? Okay, so those are three possible questions that could emerge from these scenarios. Not the only questions, but those are three possible questions that could arise. For this one, I kind of had the school nurses in mind for this one because I know there's been a lot of questions. How am I going to do this with all this classroom talk and teacher talk and education talk? I don't know that it's going to fit. Okay, so here's a possibility. Interview some parents about your district's healthy living initiatives. What do they know, not know, etc., etc. Okay, so some different things that you could ask. So what questions could arise, research questions, could arise from that? Okay, well, I'm sure you've probably asked yourself, do they really know what healthy living initiatives that our school has? Okay, and if they don't, why don't they? So what's the most effective way to communicate these initiatives that we're trying, to get? Is it a newsletter? Is it a website? Is it Facebook? What is it? Okay. And then, maybe you've asked yourself, are they doing any of these, or what do they do the most? Which one is the most frequently observed? Okay. So those are some questions that can arise from this, scenario. Just by interviewing parents, doing a parent survey, that kind of thing. This is how you would collect maybe the data. But this is why, on the right, is why you would collect the data. And these are the questions that you want to answer. Okay, and there's one more. Okay. Does specific teacher, grade level, for 1 week, kids get a snack or don't get a snack, or maybe you don't allow snacks right now, I don't know. A lot of schools do, okay, but maybe for a week or a couple of days, whatever time period you might agree to with you and that teacher, no snack. And then ask the teacher to record if they can. This might take a little work to get it, to get organized with you. If you're not the teacher conducting the research, if you're the nurse or the counselor, another teacher, whatever. So coordinate this with whoever you're working with, but maybe, possibility, okay, no snack. Recording behavior issues. Another week, they get a nutritious morning snack that's provided for them. Not that they bring from home or anything, but it's provided for them. And also record behavior issues. And then compare results from no snack to guess we got a snack. Okay? So, to the right are questions that might arise from that possible scenario. Because that might be a question, well, I wonder, what are a lot of the behavior issues that I see before lunch because they're hungry? Well, to figure that out, you got to try that and see. All right, so these are some questions that could arise from that scenario. So here are some big picture topics to maybe consider while you're trying to brainstorm a more specific question. You can look at behavior. You can look at attendance. You can look at how behavior affects attendance or attendance affects behavior. You can look at instructional strategies and assessment. Character education. Counseling services. How does or what's the best kind of ACT, SAT prep? Which is more effective, having a class offered every day, or having special seminars, or giving students access to an online tutorial that they can get to whenever they want to. Okay, I talked about healthy living initiatives. Looked a little bit at a nutrition-based possible topic. Does more recess help behavior problems? Does more recess help achievement? Does adding play into my lessons impact achievement, motivation? There's all sorts of things. Gaming, games, that can be done with psychology, with character education. It can be done with school nursing, teaching kids about hygiene, informing parents about parents and students together about combating the flu. I don't know. I'm just making things up in my head as I talk right now. Gaming definitely goes with technology integration. Cultural competence, talking about how we interact with students of different cultures, how recognizing that their culture is important, does that impact their learning, their motivation, their behavior? So does parent involvement, effective communication, book talks, if we're having library, or even reading strategies. There's all sorts, oh my goodness, a plethora of topics that we can pull from to consider for action research. So I just want to put these out here just for you to get your brain going. I know your brain's going already as you've been reading and searching and seeing what your classmates have been posting in your collaboration documents, even if you're not all school nurses or you're not all educational technology majors, you're not all school counseling majors, but you're still you're getting ideas. Okay? That was the plan behind that collaboration space. So these are some topics for you to just think about, just to kind of spur. So you read these and wait, what about such and such? Or, hey, this is an idea. Okay, then these are big picture items. So you'll have to narrow them down. by using some of those tools for refinement that you've shared with each other. Okay. So before you really, you've looked at those big picture topics, and you say, okay, this is the topic that I'm interested in. Okay. So now we need to look at it and say, all right, am I really interested? Really, am I interested in that? Or am I just picking that so it's something to do? You want your research to be interesting to you, or you will get so bored. Trust me. All right? Next is, how important is the topic? We're not going to change the face of the profession with our action research, but we want it to be something that's meaningful. Okay? Next is, what kind of time is it going to take to conduct the study? Is this something that's going to take, if I really want to look at it and collect good data, it should really take a whole school year. Okay, is that feasible for this class? No, for this course, our time requirements, you're going to have about 4 weeks to collect data. So keep that in mind when you're thinking of your question. You want something that's, and that goes to the next bullet, anticipate difficulty. You want to do something that's pretty easy. Because remember, the idea for this course is to expose you to all the whole process of conducting a research study. And we're basically in the realm of action research. It's going to kind of be a combination of empirical and action research by the time we're done. Okay? So make sure that as you're doing it, okay, the time required to collect my data can't be much more, or a month is really the max. So it needs to be something simple. Okay, is it going to cost me anything to do it? Last semester, or I guess 2 semesters ago, I had a student who did exercise balls with her English language learners. So there was a little bit of expense because she had to make sure that they each had the exercise ball to use as a chair in class. Okay. So consider that as well. And then finally, are there any issues related to ethics? Is this something different than I would do just in my regular everyday practice? Because one thing we'll have to do in a couple, 3 weeks is go and fill out what's called the IRB form, Institutional Review Board forms. What those say is, okay, here's my study. It's not going to cause harm to anyone involved. So we must consider, okay, I'm working with students. What exactly is it I want them to do, and is that any different than what I would normally do in my duties as a teacher, a school nurse, a school counselor, etc., etc., etc. We have to be pretty careful when working with students. If we're just giving surveys, it's usually not a problem. If we're just looking at a instructional strategy that we always use, it's not a problem. If we're looking at data that's already been collected, like assessment data, behavior data, health data, it's usually not a problem. Okay, but it's when we start asking students to, well, probably maybe going without a snack. That might be a problem. I don't know. Okay, maybe not. So those considerations, and we'll talk about those in a little more depth later on. And for the most part, I'm going to help you as we fashion your questions, to fashion a question that is going to stay away from any ethical situations. Okay? So, within your text, you're given a template, and it's called the 5 why process. So, the first step is, okay, what specific problem have you observed? So this is kind of a broad problem. From that broad problem, okay, so why does that happen? So you narrow it down a little bit. Okay, so you look at that next one, you say, okay, then why does that happen? And you just narrow it until you finally get to a very specific question. And that specific question is fashioned after these items. Okay? What makes me go, And how can I take that thought and make it into a question that I could easily investigate, and then I have time to collect data for? And then, is it feasible and affordable? I mean, does it make sense for me to do this? And then, are there any ethical issues that I should consider? So as you're thinking about your topic, as you're narrowing your question down, always keep these in mind. And then finally, let's think of these questions really as, maybe you've heard of SMART goals. And these are kind of, our questions are really, they're kind of like SMART goals because they need to be specific. You know, the broader they are, the harder they are to collect data on. Okay, so we want them to be specific. We want them to be meaningful. Again, do I care? Okay, so if I conduct this study, do this investigation, is the information that I'm going to find, does that mean anything to my practice? So it needs to be meaningful. It needs to be action-oriented, action research. We need to be able to say, okay, because this happened, then this was the outcome. And is that a good outcome? Is that a bad outcome? What needs to change to that outcome? And it's just kind of a cyclical thing, all right? Is it realistic? Again, does it make sense? Is it something I can do within the scope of this course and of this content, this context, I should say? And then finally, is it timely? Do I have time to collect my data? And is this data, is it something I need to know for 2016? Or is it some problem that they've addressed 50 years ago? Right? So, is it specific? Is it meaningful? Is my question action-oriented, realistic, and timely? All right? Keep those 5 things in mind, and you'll have a nice, specific, a nice, tight question that we can then proceed to develop into your research investigation. So, choosing a topic and a research question comes down to what makes you go, and how can I take that thought and write it in a way that's going to help me try to use some action to answer that question to better my personal practice and to use evidence-based decision making. That's really what we're that's really in the end what we're doing. We are doing evidence-based decision making through our action research project. So we're going to have a question, and we're going to develop a plan for answering that question. And part of developing that plan is going to be looking at what other people have done and seeing maybe where there's holes or what's already been done and what could be done and recommendations that people have had to move forward. And we're going to conduct our investigation, and then we're going to look at the data from that investigation, and we're going to say, okay, here's what I found. Here's my numbers. Here's my qualitative data or my, interview answers and responses, survey responses. Here's what people said. And because they said that, here's the trends that I see. Here's the patterns that emerged as I did that. And because of these patterns, now we need to do this. These are the conclusions I can draw, and this is what needs to happen from this point forward. Okay, so that's going to be kind of the whole process that we're going to go through. So the first thing is this. What's my research question going to be? It needs to be smart, meaningful, action-oriented, realistic, and timely.